This tutorial is the first in a series that will teach you how to use the Illustrator pen tool. Now the pen tool is an incredibly powerful tool. You'll see it crop up in a lot of different programs like Photoshop. It's used in Maya. It creates Bezier curves, which I'm assuming is created by a French person named Bezier. I don't know much about that, but these curves are incredibly useful and very powerful and used in a variety of programs. So learning it, there is a kind of a steep learning curve to it a little bit, but learning it is really crucial to be able to be effective in Illustrator and in a bunch of different programs. So I have this practice template all set up for you. All of these hints and lines are on a layer that is locked, so you can't accidentally select them, and you are able to draw on top of them. So let's begin by getting out our pen tool. The pen tool looks like an old-timey quill pen sort of situation. P is the quick key for it, and it looks like this when you see it on the screen. And the pen tool draws stroke lines. And so I want to make sure that while I'm drawing lines, I don't accidentally have a fill on, because what it does, if I'm trying to draw a fill while the stroke is going, it tries to close that off that shape as I'm drawing. So if I change the fill to green, you can see that as I draw, it's trying to fill it in, which is very confusing, especially when it's still white and it doesn't look like it's doing it. So it's very important to come over here to your fill color and change it to none, at least while you're drawing, and then later you can always fill any shapes that you create later. I'm also going to change the color of my brush, or my stroke, to a red and make it a little bit thicker by using this stroke palette here so that you can see the lines that I'm creating. And I'd probably do that too as you're following along. So the first thing that we'll be learning here, and I'm going to minimize these again so that I have a full screen to show you here. I have some hints on the left side here. We're going to start with very basic straight lines and then work our way up to more complex curved lines. Now the way that the pen tool works is as I click, when I click I create a point. Now if you'll remember that Illustrator is a vector program, that means that it creates images using lines and points. We're creating those points now, and then it will draw a line between them. So if I click in a place and then I click again, it creates that line. You can see a preview of that line. Right now it's in red because we're on layer 2 and layer 2 defaults to red, so that's why you're seeing this preview line here being red. And as I click, it adds on from the previous line. And when I just click, I create a straight line. So I'm just trying to pick these points, and as I click, I add on to my previous line. Now when I'm at here and I want to be finished, there's two easy ways to finish a line. The first is to hit enter, and that will just say that your line is done. Another method is if you hold down control and just click anywhere else, that will also end a line. The enter is one less click. But if you don't press that, then it thinks you want to keep continuing your previous line. So these second examples here are asking you to hit enter after each of them to finish them. So I'll keep clicking here. And it doesn't have to be perfect. These guidelines are just there as a reference because you will often be using this to trace. In Photoshop it's used a lot to do extraction, to cut things out, to create selection areas, and you'll be tracing around like a person that you're planning on cutting out. And then you'll have that go all the way around, turn it into a selection area, and then you can use that to cut somebody out. Now this one is showing you that if you hold down Shift before you click your second line, it forces your line to be at a 45-degree angle, including your perfectly vertical and perfectly horizontal. So if I hold down Shift as I select these, that will force these lines to be straight. And that can be very handy when you're trying to draw 45-degree angle lines, when you're trying to draw vertical or horizontal lines. And I'm just holding down Shift this entire time. If I let go of Shift, then I can go in any direction again. But as long as I'm holding down Shift, it'll force those lines to be that way. And then I'm at the end here. I can press enter again to finish that line. Now these are 45-degree angle lines, so if I hold down Shift once again, it's not just vertical and horizontal lines, but I can recreate these by doing that. And that's basically all there really is to drawing straight lines. It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't get you very far because most things are curved. I have some examples of some shapes here. Now a shape is just a line that ends where it begins. And so if I start here on this square and I hold down Shift because it's perfectly square, and I come back up to where I start, notice that as I move my mouse over that first point again, my pen tool now has a little white circle next to it. That tells me that I'm about to close that shape. So when I click on this now, this is a complete closed off shape, which can be really useful in a lot of ways. One of those is now it's very easy for me to go in and fill in this shape with a color. And because it's closed, it's just like if I used the rectangle tool to create this. And so obviously you probably just would use the rectangle tool to create a square, but when shapes get more complex, you don't have much of a choice. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my fill again just by clicking this none symbol here to turn that off. Now this star, once again, there is a shape that creates stars, but this is just good practice. These lines are not at 45-degree angles, so I can't hold down Shift to create them. But if I just get fairly close, and the most important thing when you're working in shapes is remembering that when you are ready to close it, you have to make sure that that pen tool has that circle next to it to tell you that you're closing off that shape. And now I can fill it in. We'll make a yellow. And those are shapes. So make sure that if you want a shape, if you want to close it off, that you see that symbol before you do it. And you can see an example of that symbol right here. Now that really is the end of straight lines. The next thing that we'll be talking about is where the pen tool starts to get complex, and that is creating curved lines. Now a curved line works pretty similarly, ooh, that's a tough word, to a straight line. So I'm going to start. We have this curved line here that I'm trying to replicate, and I'm going to click just like I normally do there at the beginning. And now I'm going to move ahead, and this is where I want this line to end, but notice my preview line is straight. Instead of just clicking, now I'm going to click and hold down my mouse. As I'm holding down my mouse, I can drag it. And what you're dragging, these little red dots at the end of this line, this is a handle. And as I drag it, you'll see your preview line. I have to kind of move over a little bit more here. When my preview line is looking more and more like my original. And I want to drag it until it does replicate that original line and then let go. And the important thing to remember is that you want to drag in the direction the line would be going next. So think of this as a road. If I was following this road, I'd keep going in this direction, and as I drag that line, now I can let go right here and I can create that curve. You can see how long these handles are. If I hit enter, you can see it's a little better. Here's a handle. This is the direction that the line is going to enter, or the curve is going to enter that point. So it's going to be coming in at this angle, and when it leaves, it's going to leave at this angle. Now eventually we'll get to the point where we're creating multiple curves, and you'll see how this handle is going to affect your next curve. But for now, we're just creating really simple shapes here, simple curves. So if I click here and click here and drag, I just drag until the preview lines up with the line I want to replicate. Same thing with this one. I click where it begins, I click where it ends, and I hit enter to OK that. And I'll just keep doing that as practice. Just want you to get familiar with the way that you can click and drag to create an angled line. These next lines are a little less symmetrical. Doesn't matter where I start or end, not necessarily, so I could even start at this point and drag here. Now, because the main part of the curve is really on that side, it means I have to drag a longer handle. In this case, if I did it the other direction, that might not be the case. And the important thing is you keep dragging in the direction that the line would want to go next. So I don't want to drag around this way because that'll give me the opposite. I'm dragging towards the left because in this case the curve makes a sharp turn to the left. Same thing with here. Making a sharp upward turn. This one is making a gradual turn to the down and the right. Now notice that I missed kind of where I wanted it to be. While I'm holding down my mouse, if I want to change where that anchor point is, I can hold down the space bar and move this wherever. And I'm still holding down the mouse, and if I let go of the space bar, that locks it in that place. So I can actually hold down space bar, move this where I want it to be, and then drag it out a little bit more. That can be nice if you miss the exact spot. Now, your lines are probably never going to be exactly like the thing you're trying to trace, but you can get fairly close. And from any sort of reasonable distance, it's not going to be noticeable. Now we're dealing with a multiple point curve. These curves actually change. We start with a curve that is concave down, and so the bendy part is down, and then it changes to a curve that's concaving up. And generally, if we see this, we want to create multiple points, and the middle point is going to be at as close as we can to the exact point where this curve changes from angling down to up. And so, for example, if I click here to start, the next point should be somewhere in here, and eventually you get a good feel for just like looking at a line and telling where it is. But I'd say somewhere probably right there. I'm going to angle this so that my preview looks like the thing. Now, this is where the pen tool gets confusing, but where it's trying to help you. This handle means that when this line leaves this point, it wants to try to go in the direction of the handle. It's trying to follow the handle. The longer this handle is, the more it's going to try to follow that first. So you can see that in my line preview, it really wants to go here, even though I want it to go here. And depending on how long that is, it'll try to do that more. And what it's trying to do is to create a nice line that has a nice angle to it. It's trying to help you out. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it is, but in this case, because my previous angle was so close, I can really just click. I don't even have to drag to create that second curve, because it's going to do it for me. And so part of what you have to learn as you're using the pen tool, and it only comes through experience, is just where to click, so maybe right here, and how long to drag the handle. And if you ever goof up, if you say, well, you know what, I'm going to try to click here, and you can't quite replicate it, you can press Control-Z, and that'll take you one step back, and you can try again. So there's really no wrong number. You want to try to complete a line in as few clicks as possible, because that'll make the line a lot smoother. But especially early on, just getting the hang of where the lines are will be your main purpose, so you don't need to worry as much about how many clicks you do. Now in this case, this is a closed shape, and when there's an angle, that's a good place to start this, but if there's not, I want to choose, like this is all just round surfaces, I'd like to pick maybe just at the top of some curve somewhere. So here would be a great place to start, I think. There's really no wrong place to start. Some places will be easier than others. And I'm just trying to click and drag. And if I go too far, once again, I can always like, oh, that's not quite lining up. I can hold down space bar and move this. I can press Control-Z to undo it and go back a point, but I'm just trying to replicate this line with as few points as possible. Sometimes I see people try to create curved lines by just clicking a lot of individual points like that, and that looks bad from any distance. So just keep practicing with the curve. That's the only way to really get to the point where you feel comfortable with it, is to keep practicing it. So I'm going to keep spinning around here, and then once again, because it's a closed shape, I want to start end where I began, and so that creates that shape. And now if I wanted to, looks like the Loch Ness Monster, I'll turn it blue. I can close off any shape and fill it in without any difficulty. Now these are curves that are much more like perfect circles. When I'm doing that, if I click here to start, what I can often do to try to get that perfect is if I hold down Shift, with a circle, the point should have handles that are tangent to it. That means that it only touches that curve once. And so holding down Shift can often help with that, to force those points to be more circular. But once again, that's not necessary. I'm holding down Shift again to force these handles to be straight up and down. And then I'm holding down Shift again to try to replicate that. If you have to make a perfect circle, it's usually easier just to get the circle tool, the ellipsis tool out, and hold down Shift to make it, instead of trying to do it by hand. because circles are really hard to try to replicate using the pen tool. Now, here is where things become more complex again. We have curved lines, we have straight lines, but in a lot of cases the things that we're trying to create are a combination of both. So how do we change from a straight line to a curved line? This is what we're practicing here. So this first part is just a straight line. I'll click here to start it, I'll hold down Shift because it's a straight line, and I'll click there. Now I want it to curve off of this, which means the next time I click, I need to click and drag. So I'm going to click and drag, create that line, and I'm going to click and drag and get this line. Now the problem here is I have a handle that is moving out, which means the line wants to go up in that direction again. To turn off a curve, all I have to do is click on that point, and that will force it to be a line again. So now I can come over here, click, create this curve again. And in this case, if I can just click there, I can do straight lines. So if I have a curve and I don't want it to be a curve, I can always click on it. Just clicking will turn it back into a straight line. And vice versa also, if I have a straight line a straight line that I want to turn into a curve, I can click and drag on it, and I can drag new handles. Those handles, these little round, almost tangent lines that come off of it, are my indication that I'm going to have a curve. So I can make this, I just drag to create a new curve. I'm going to hold down Shift because it's pretty close to a circle. And that is pretty close. Now, if I want to have an angle, then what I have to do is I have to actually change that. And there's two ways to do this. So I'll show you one way, then I'll show you another. The first way is this. So I'll click here, and I'll create this part of it. And my problem is that the line doesn't want to go to the left. It wants to keep following that handle. How can I change that? Well, I can do it by moving the handle. And one way to do that is to hold down the Alt key when you're in the pen tool. You get this little triangle looking thing. And I can pick up a handle then. Oh, and I want to be careful not to miss it. That's kind of annoying, but Illustrator has a hard time if you miss it. So I hold down Alt, and I can click on this, and I can move it in the direction I want my line to go next. And so what I'm seeing here now is a line that wants to go to the left, so it comes in. That backwards one, the one that goes opposite of the direction you drag, is the way the line's moving in. So it's going to move in this direction, but it's going to leave in this direction. So now when I click again, when I draw my next one, so I can just hold down Alt, move the point in the direction I want it to go next, hold down Alt. Oops, try that again. The thing I don't like about this is if you miss that handle, it actually turns your line off and you have to start the line up again. So I can switch it to this way. Now another method that's a little more complex, so you might want to stick to the other one, or you might want to try this one. When I'm clicking here, I know that my next line can't be heading down in this direction. If while I'm dragging the handle I hold down the Alt key, that also lets me move it even before I create the line. So I can click here, hold down Alt, move this direction I want it to go next, and then it automatically is set up. And I feel like that way is easier in the long run, so you don't have the problem of trying to click on that handle, but it's also an extra step while you're building it. So I hold down Alt, I move it in that direction. And once again, the way that you know where to click to create this line is just because you've done it a bunch of times. That's the best way to learn how to use the pen tool. Now here again, I don't want my line to go to the left, even though that's the way I had to drag to create it. So I hold down Alt until it's facing the way I want it to go next, then I let go of Alt, and then I can let go of the mouse button. It is a lot of individual clicks to do that, and a lot of quick keys But this is really the most crucial thing. Another thing that you can do actually, if it's a point like this, if you just click on that point, that will turn off that handle there, and then you can start another line in any other direction. So there's several different methods that you can use. Oh, that wasn't even close. I'll hold down Control Z to undo it. And I'll show that one again too. So if I have it, the line wants to go this way, and I can see that from the preview it wants to go down, not up. If I click there and turn it into just a straight line again, now I can click and drag it in the other direction. So which one of those do I prefer? I really use all three of them all the time, just depending on which one I'm thinking about at the time. I don't think any one of them is generally more useful than the others. So once again, the three things I can do, I can hold down Alt after I've already created a handle and move it in a different direction. I can, while I'm drawing something, oops, let me Control Z that one. While I'm drawing something, I can hold down Alt and move the handle in another direction before I let go of the mouse, and that will do it as I'm building it. Or if I have a point like this, I can just click on it, and that will make it so I can go in a straight line in any direction from that point. So these are just some examples of some lines that you will most likely see as you're beginning to use the pen tool. In the next tutorial we'll talk about making more how to follow a real thing instead of just some shapes that were created for the purposes of learning this. But mostly practice. If you're not feeling comfortable with the pen tool, bring some image into Illustrator and trace around it and get familiar with that. It takes some practice. There's definitely a learning curve with it. These hints on the side may be helpful too, but then you will get better at this tool and be able to use it in a variety of different programs in a variety of ways. It really is one of the most helpful tools that you can learn if you are getting into graphic design.